Hello, I'm Alex Higgs, and welcome to our podcast. We've just come off the back of a data community meetup. I'm joined here by Stephen Nwoye, who did the presentation today. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go over some of the questions in a bit more detail that we had from the audience, and maybe explore some of the themes that you talked about in your presentation. So one of the first questions we had was, what makes what you talked about today more? What makes it more than just RAG LLMs?
So when you look at the architectural design from the paradise that I use on the vector database, you will understand that that's actually what gets hit anytime the prompt comes into the system, because you want the AI assistant to retrieve exactly what you want it to retrieve to answer a particular prompt. But then the vector database is the only layer that tells the AI assistant so that you're allowed to access anything that is in here. Anything that is referenced in here, that will be the best way to say it. Anything that is referenced in the vector database. Because the entire catalog itself is a complete documentation framework. And we don't want the AI assistant to have access to the entire catalog. We want it to have access to some part of it, because then it's like giving the AI access to our entire secret. So we want it to have access to certain part of it. But again, we want it to be able to do it very quickly. And that's why we're storing those that we want it to access in the vector database, but also converting them to serialization so that it's very easy for the AI assistant to pick up on those particular context that it needs to answer a particular prompt in that sense. So I think it's more than just connecting it to a source and telling it to retrieve document from there. It's about putting that governance layer in between that document and what you want it to access, and giving the AI access to that layer in order to query what it needs to answer a particular prompt. So it's RAG, but the design goes a little bit beyond that. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to explain there.
Yeah,
So,
no, that makes sense. Yeah. You need a clean, especially when you're in an organization like the NHS that has probably got thousands and thousands of files, all varying qualities, all from different people who have different understandings of what they're kind of they're writing down.
Yeah.
You need some kind of framework, both architecturally, technically, and also for governance, to be able to support the LLM accessing the data you want it to. Whether that's stopping it from accessing lower quality data or more sensitive data. That's my understanding of what you said.
Yes, and also making it very easy for the LLM to find the most relevant document or content, because anything that is being stored in the vector database is curated, summarized, and the overview is actually what is being stored there. So it's like when you ask a question, it knows exactly which of the overview in the vector database answers that prompt more correctly, instead of giving it access to go and look for it from the entire catalog, which of course you end up supplying much more context than the large language model needs.
I mean, so out of curiosity, did you when you were initially starting this, did you give it access to kind of more than you intended? With because you didn't have that vector database yet, and like, what were the results of that?
So the first thing was to try to see if by just applying just mere text to the large language model, it performs well. But it does actually. But the thing is that the moment you start the documentation pages start growing, then you see that the actual context has been lost. Like the large language model is returning something you actually don't really want it to pick up on. So that led to like rethinking the whole design and be like, all right, let's put a buffer between the context, the entire context, and what we wanted to access. But again, let's summarize the context, store it in the vector database so that anytime a prompt comes in, it hits the overview first and try to work out, all right, I have this curated, summarized layer that references the actual full context. So which of this overview answers this prompt more correctly? I'm going to pick on that, then go to the actual catalog to pick up that context to supply to the large language model. So it's like just making sure that it's getting that curated and more, I would say, precise. You actually can get precise, but a little bit more precise context for a prompt. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Okay, so did you did you intervene in any way to kind of tell it that it was more accurate, like weight it or do any like reinforcement stuff there, or did it kind of work that out?
So it did actually work that out in a sense, but it goes back to how the overview came about, which is a little bit more proprietary. So it goes how
that's fine.
Into how the overview came about. But being able to generate the overview is like the secret sauce there. Because then it's giving it that full context, but in a very summarized sense that captures everything. Yeah. So that whenever a prompt comes in, it's hitting that overview first before then pulling it from.
It's almost like a big filter, isn't it? So stop it from going crazy.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So one of the themes that we explored in your presentation, and we had a kind of deeper discussion at the end actually, was around governance, right? So I mean, I think one of the biggest kind of things that people are aware of with AI right now is it's all context. AI is great as long as it has all the correct, the correct information, good data quality, which is what we've kind of just been talking about with the vector databases there, and it's kind of the filter for it. But that governance has to come from somewhere. A human has to define what that looks like. You have to get buy-in from the organization. And if you're a larger organization, especially like the NHS, then that's going to be trickier. And you were sort of kind of talking around how the hardest part for you was building that governance framework. I assume sort of talking to the business, it took a while. So can you talk about a bit about your experience there?
So especially when it comes to big organizations, the best approach from experience is to just start with the primary data set. Because then it's very easy for you to define what your primary data set is and just start from there. Because then if you go out to try to do everything, it turns into this very long dragged project that probably wouldn't take off anytime soon. So start with the primary data set in a sense, because then what we found out is that anytime we go into implementing something like this, we start with that primary data set. It might just be like a couple of tables, maybe 50 tables, 60, 100. But then it's very easy to start with that and work out who owns this and the testing over time around it, the ownership and how it is being accessed and the data dictionary around it. Because actually that's what the governance is all about, explaining what the data that sits inside this table actually means, and also how it is being accessed and the security around who's supposed to access it and who's not supposed to look at it. So it's quite easy to do it from a point of just primary data set for that organization, because then it's very difficult to try to do it for the entire organization. But again, it's a very big challenge in a way. It takes months, and I think it's going to even take some NHS trust years in order to build that governance in that sense, because we're getting to this point that you want to use AI, but there's so much data you're looking at that you don't understand what they mean in the sense. You don't understand who owns it. So sort of that first stage of getting ready, which of course I believe is the most important thing than going out to buy any AI tool that promises those sort of self-service approach, just being able to just calm down and look at what you have on Strike. Try to work out the data you actually have and how to tag that data in that governance manner. It is difficult, but just start with a primary data set, I would say.
So keep the scope small. Is what I'm hearing, and kind of build it out as well. Don't try and do everything at once. Okay. I mean, I think that's it's good advice for any data project generally, but I think in particular with AI, right? Because it promises a lot, and if you allow it to, it can do a lot. But you always have to take a step back and not get too excited about it, and slowly build out and get value that way. Yeah. So what was I imagine? Did you have and if you can't talk about it, that's fine. But was there a particular use case that you were looking for to kind of prove this to stakeholders, to other people in the organization?
Actually, like two main use cases in a sense. The speed of the development, because then when you look at as data engineers, we're more concerned about scalability, we're concerned about security, we're concerned about cost, and also the flexibility and maintainability of any platform that we're using. But again, the speed of development in a sense. And when you go further down, you're looking at the understanding of that data set. So it's just around the development speed and understanding of the data set, because most times all the questions you're getting from the clinicians or people using the report is how you calculated this. They want to use the report, you understand, but they want to be able to validate that report.
Building trust is very important.
Yeah, building trust is very important. And the only way they can do it is if they understand how you're calculating it. And most times they would want to ask you, but they feel like you probably tell them they're asking too much questions. You understand, because you just explain it in a technical term, but they'll be like, yeah, all right. And they might go off not using the report because they actually trust it. Yeah, that's that. But providing that layer that they could interact very well with, and because you have this very curated content that is coming in specifically from your data set and the transformation and the data dictionary, it can explain exactly, all right, this column, this is how we calculate it. Be like, oh no, you shouldn't be calculating it that way, because we don't actually record it that way. And it sort of helps this collaboration and building trust. And I think it's a very long journey to get into that stage, where you fully have total trust for your data. But being able to expedite that process with a centralized catalog that makes it easy for people to validate the data set that is coming in. Yeah. So that was actually what inspired the project. And the fact that it was very difficult for people coming into organizations to this data migration project that we worked on. It was very difficult just to understand the data set, like what was doing what in that sense. And they will tell you, all right, the person that knows this very well has been transferred to a different team. But what we'll do is this.
Well, they're not.
Yeah,
they're not even there.
Yeah. So all it is, I will get to try to get a meeting, and you could ask them the questions. They'll be like, all right, then you get the meeting, and they'll be like, yeah, sorry, I have 15 minutes. So what was your question? We're like, okay. So how do you do it? Like, so we don't do actually, you know what? Let me refer you to somebody else. And that's actually like production time being wasted, just trying to understand the process and the context. Yeah.
But it's important to do it, right? So you have to have someone telling you how it works, and getting that time. It can be frustrating, but if you get that right person, then they tell you that they're the information you need, and that can be worth weeks and weeks of trial and error, right? So
and having to go through the documentation yourself, because there's so much to look at, so many people to quiz and everything. And with large enterprises, like they're using an operational system over time, then something better comes out, then they have to migrate. But the way that the old one has been capturing the data doesn't change. It's like it's stamped. So you have to understand how the old operational system was operating in order to build on top of it. So you just have to build that knowledge repository. You just have to, over time, I don't think there is any way going around it. You just have to build the knowledge repository.
There isn't a shortcut. It's building that is a shortcut for your future self. Because you can go and read it and save all the time, but your current self needs to build it. Yeah. Great. Okay. So one last question then. So you mentioned testing earlier. It's a subject I'm particularly interested in. So when you say testing, were you talking about like user acceptance testing, getting in front of the user, or like kind of unit testing? I'd be interested to understand kind of what kind of testing you did on this.
So the testing I mentioned earlier is when you generate or when you write a script for a report, you're most likely working off a text spec. So the large language model has that sort of capability to tell you that what you're producing or what this text spec is asking of are two different things. So even before it hits the user assessment test, it's already telling you that, you're not calculating this column properly. If this is what you're trying to achieve, what is on this text spec, technical specification that you're trying to achieve, you're not doing it correctly. And adding that sort of validation, even for the data engineers, and also when the user wants to use it, because the thing with generating reports or advanced analytics for the user is that they want to actually understand the entire column that you're using, where they're coming from, and how you're calculating it. Because with NHS, there is so much caveat. There is some reports that you can use from 2 a.m. because of this. There's a report you can use from 5 a.m. because of this. So all those sort of contexts, being able to help them understand, all right, I've been able to implement these things, and they could tell you, no, for this report we don't use this or we don't use that. And that's the only way to do it, actually, because the data engineers, most likely we don't stay so much in the same organization for a long period of time. And the clinicians that stay longer tend to understand how the system operates. But they might not be so technical enough to tell you exactly how to do it. But if you explain how you're doing it, they can test it in that validation sense and tell you, right, you're doing it correctly or you're not doing it correctly in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially with larger organizations and older organizations, there will be some people who have been there for a while and have a lot of what we call kind of like tribal knowledge. It's kind of in their heads. It hasn't really been written down.
Yeah.
You may get data engineers that are there for a short amount of time. And if they don't document it, then that person may be getting asked the same questions every few years. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good to break that cycle and be the person to write it down, put it in the right place, and so future people can benefit from that for sure.
Yes.
Great. Okay. I think that's everything I wanted to ask. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Or anything that you want to go into more detail on?
No, not at the moment. Yeah. Well,
okay.
But there's so much happening in this space, and I believe it's just being able to own your own knowledge repository in the sense, because there are so many SaaS tools, platforms that are offering that. But the problem with that is, how do you get off where you want to get off from them? Like, how do you migrate that in that sense? It's quite difficult to do. I've seen a documentation migration process, and it's even tougher than the actual data migration in that sense. So being able to develop a catalog solution that is for your organization is very important. It's very important and allows you that composability kind of architecture, that you have the storage different and you own the storage, and whatever sits on top of it, the mechanism that sits on top of it, you could easily change or replace it. Sort of what we see with Databricks and in the cloud, being able to offer that layer, and you have your compute and you manage your storage yourself. and them offering that service of, all right, we're going to help you implement this Unity catalog on top of your data. At the same time with the documentation, you want to be able to use those frameworks that are very composable and allow you to have access to the actual documentation storage, because then you could easily move from one provider to another. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think one last thing I to call out. I think having documentation at that scale as well means that if you have a stakeholder who's getting very excited about what you're doing, you're achieving great results, it may lead, in some organizations, it might lead to hiring more people, the project growing, having more use cases, and then inevitably needing to train people up and knowledge share. So having that documentation there is just indispensable to scale, not just scale technically, but scale from a human resourcing perspective as well.
And I think there are so much benefits that we could get from the large language model if we have that knowledge that it could tap in and begin to sort of uncover those opportunities for more advanced analytics, because then you could be looking at it and not looking at it in that regard. But when the large language model has access to that knowledge repository, that information, it could sort of uncover those opportunities and be like, yeah, you could actually be doing this with your data, and this, it's all doing this without even access to the live data, but just the knowledge around that data. So I think the benefit is so much that you shouldn't skip that.
No, it takes time, but it's worth it, essentially.
It does, actually, yeah.
It opens up so many opportunities, so many doors and things you can do with it. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Same. Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.